Coming up on our newscast tonight. The U.S. Secretary of State is in North Korea on his third trip to the regime. Mike Pompeo, joined by an all-star diplomacy squad, will closely discuss denuclearization issues with Pyongyang officials. After wrapping up a two-day set of inter-Korean basketball friendlies, the two sides agree on forming joint teams for more sporting events, as well as to hold further discussions on such exchanges and cooperation. Washington slaps duties on Chinese goods. Beijing has its own measures locked and loaded. The rest of the world braced for the impact. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Choi. America's top diplomat is currently in North Korea to discuss the follow-up measures to the June 12th Singapore summit. So far, little is known about what's covered during the earlier sessions. Our foreign ministry correspondent Lee Ji-won has been keeping close tabs on the meetings. She joins us on the line right now. Ji-won, what do you have for us at this point?
Daniel, like you said, we don't know much about what's going on inside the reclusive regime, but Reuters cited pool reporters traveling with the secretary and said Pompeo met with the vice chairman of the ruling Workers' Party Central Committee, Kim Young-chul, with whom he had coordinated the June 12th summit. Pompeo had lunch with Vice Chairman Kim, and the two also had talks for a couple of hours. Kim told Pompeo that today's meeting is really meaningful, and Pompeo replied that he agrees and that he looks forward to it being very productive. When he arrived earlier in the day at around noon, Pompeo was greeted by Vice Chairman Kim and the North Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho. Now, while there has been speculation that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could treat Pompeo to a banquet for dinner, we haven't got any official word yet.
So, Ji-won, the ex-Intel chief is no stranger to North Korea. We know that his third visit, but the first sleepover. What's on his schedule?
Yes, Daniel, this will be Pompeo's first overnight stay in North Korea. And according to the poll report, the U.S. delegates will be spending the night at Baekwawon, or 100 Flowers Garden, the most prestigious state guest house. It's where two South Korean presidents, Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, stayed during their summits with Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, in 2000 and 2007, respectively. Former U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright also stayed there in 2000. Now, at the guest house, Vice Chairman Kim reportedly told Pompeo that he must be used to North Korea now that he's been there 3 times, and that the more he comes, the more trust they can build with each other. And Pompeo joked that if he comes one more time, he'll have to pay tax there. Now, Pompeo is expected to have his next round of talks with North Korean officials tomorrow morning. And after that, he will leave for Japan at around 4 p.m. And there he'll be holding a trilateral foreign ministers meeting with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts on Sunday. That's the latest we have on U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's third visit to Pyongyang.
All right, Ji-won, thank you for those updates. That was our Foreign Affairs Ministry correspondent, Lee Ji-won. Now, the South Korean basketball delegation has returned home after completing their 4-day schedule in Pyongyang. Our Park Hee-jun zooms in on what the team had to say about their experience up north.
After wrapping up their 4-day schedule in Pyongyang, the South Koreans who participated in the Inter-Korean basketball games arrived home Friday afternoon. The 101-member delegation, including officials, basketball players, and press, arrived at Seoul Air Base in Seongnam on 2 military transport planes at around 5:45 p.m. Korea time. Seoul's Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun told reporters on arrival that the event allowed the two Koreas to exchange their views on implementing the Panmunjom Declaration through sports exchanges, and that he expects it to continue.
We anticipate the sports exchanges to not only contribute to implementing the Panmunjom Declaration, but also to boosting civilian exchanges. The government will actively cooperate to make sure that they lead to closer inter-Korean relations.
The minister added that he felt Pyongyang had changed a great deal since his last visit 11 years ago. He said the city now has much more life and that he could sense the North Koreans hoping for relations to get better. South Korean basketball officials also described to the reporters what they thought of the North Korean team.
I didn't expect the male players to play so well, considering they hadn't competed in international events for the past decade or so. But they were much better than I originally thought, and they were not so different from our players. I think it may be because we're all from the same roots.
With a series of sports events lined up for the two Koreas, officials expect a higher level of exchanges between the two sides. The next round of inter-Korean basketball games are set to take place in the fall, this time in the south. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
So the first inter-Korean basketball friendlies in over a decade wrapped up with various results, including a draw and both sides taking wins. According to our Oh Jung-hee, the competition took a backseat to learning more about each other, as well as exploring ways to improve sports exchanges and cooperation.
Wrapping up the second and final day of unification basketball games, the South and North Korean officials shared their impressions of the friendlies. A farewell dinner was held in Pyongyang on Thursday evening, hosted by Choi Hui, the chairman of North Korea's National Sports Guidance Committee. Choi said, seeing the players running together, he felt the two Koreas are, in the end, one, sharing the same history and language.
In sports, there's a winner and a loser, but there's no such thing when it comes to achieving unification. Let's further strengthen our sports exchanges and win even more gold medals at the 18th Asian Games.
South Korea's unification minister Jo Myung-kyun said every match had been heartwarming.
I believe we'll move much closer to reconciliation, peace, and unification if the South and the North go together, just like our basketball players did. I'm sure the success of these basketball games paved the way for more inter-Korean sports exchanges.
The two Koreas played 4 games in total, 2 each on Wednesday and Thursday. On Wednesday, the teams were a mix of South and North Koreans. And on Thursday, the games were the South versus the North. This round of inter-Korean basketball games was the 4th in history, the last one having been held 15 years ago. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
After the buzzer sounded, the two sides did not just go separate ways. A surprise round of talks were held on ramping up cross-border sports cooperation. Very quickly, it was agreed North Korean table tennis players will travel south to compete in a tournament held in late July. Kwon Jang-ho gets us up to speed with the developments.
North Korea says it will send a team of athletes to participate in the 2018 Korea Open table tennis tournament, which will take place later this month in Daejeon.
The North told us they will send a 25-member delegation, which includes 16 athletes, to the south. They will arrive through Incheon International Airport on July 15th and depart the same way on the 23rd.
The agreement was the result of Thursday's late-night meeting between the vice ministers of Seoul and Pyongyang's sports ministries. It comes just 3 weeks after high-level sports talks were held in June. According to Noh, who briefed reporters on the details of the discussions, Pyongyang also promised to send a team of 21 North Korean athletes to the World Shooting Championships, which will begin late August in Changwon, Gyeongsang-namdo Province. The two Koreas will also have more basketball matches following the ones that were held in Pyongyang this week. The next games will be held in South Korea during the fall, but the exact date is yet to be decided. As for the upcoming Asian Games that kick off in August in Indonesia, the South proposed beginning the joint teams training as soon as possible. The two Koreas are already set to field joint teams for rowing, canoeing and women's basketball, and there was no further mention of forming joint teams for other sports in Thursday's talks. The North Korean players for rowing and canoeing will train in the South, but details for women's basketball will have to be further discussed through the relevant organizations. The two sides will continue to discuss the details of their joint participation. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
America's new tariffs on Chinese goods are now in effect. Beijing is ready to immediately respond with duties of its own. U.S. President Donald Trump remains unfazed, adamant on his stance that a trade war is something his country can't lose because Washington holds all the cards. Kim Hae-sung has more on the developments that spooked markets the world over, including Korea.
It's D-Day. The U.S. has slapped tariffs on Chinese goods on Friday, the first shot in a trade war between the world's two biggest economies. As of Friday, U.S. Eastern Time, Washington started taxing 818 Chinese products, including semiconductors and airplane parts that are worth $34 billion a year. The Chinese Foreign Ministry hit back, saying China always opposes trade protectionism and that unilateral pressure will be futile. Beijing has vowed to hit back with tariffs on the same amount of U.S. goods, ranging from soybeans to pork. The move comes after President Trump repeatedly decried the U.S. trade deficit with China and accused Beijing of forcing U.S. companies to transfer their intellectual property to Chinese companies to enter the Chinese market. Following Friday's tariffs, the U.S. also plans to impose a second round of tariffs on $16 billion worth of Chinese products in about 2 weeks. Another action China has said it would respond to in kind by imposing tariffs on U.S. products including soybeans, dairy products, and automobiles. Experts are warning that an escalating trade war between the two superpowers could disrupt supply chains and hurt business confidence. Hyundai Research Institute estimates that if the U.S. imports of Chinese goods drop 10%, this will eventually cause Korea's exports to China shrink by more than $28 billion.
South Korea trades 37% of its exports with China and the U.S. In particular, it sells a lot of intermediary goods to China that are made into final goods and exported to the U.S. Growing trade tensions, tit-for-tat measures between Washington and Beijing could slow down South Korea's real economy.
The Trump administration, in addition, is mounting clashes with other trading partners, in particular Canada, Mexico, and the EU. Fitch Ratings estimates that a full-blown trade war between Washington and Beijing could cost the world economy some $2 trillion. Kaesong, Arirang News.
The wait is over. A comprehensive tax reform for real estate is unveiled by the Moon Jaein administration. It centers around taxing rich property owners harder. Here's Jeju with the details.
The South Korean government is raising taxes on wealthy homeowners to reduce income disparities and even out tax imbalances. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance on Friday announced its plan to increase the main real estate holding tax by 1/10 of a percentage point to 0.5% for properties worth $530,000 or more. The maximum tax rate for homes will be raised from the current 2% to 2.5%. And for people who have 3 houses or more, there will be an extra 1/3 of a percentage point tacked onto that. The government is also changing how it assesses a property's fair market value. Currently, a home's value as assessed by the government is multiplied by 80% to calculate fair market value, which is then the basis for calculating tax. This was originally done to help ease the burden on homeowners. But the 80% rate will be raised by 5% a year until 2020, bringing to 90% to better reflect real values. The tax cycle will affect around 340,000 people, raising extra revenue worth $700 million a year. The government plans to use the extra money to give financial assistance to newlyweds and the underprivileged. 최시영, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is looking to provide 1.6 million homes to newlyweds and young people by the year 2022, part of ongoing efforts to deliver on its promise of improving people's lives. Oh Soo-young turns the spotlight to this latest support measure.
The government plans to provide more state-funded homes to support hundreds of thousands of young families, specifying its social housing roadmap released last year. Under the updated plan, 880,000 newlywed couples will have access to public housing schemes, subsidies and lower interest rates on loans to help them find their first home. These include 250,000 council homes provided at rent prices up to 80% below the market average, as well as 100,000 homes built in special zones customised for newlyweds. The government also aims to build 100 new childcare centres within public housing grounds and will install facilities for child safety. 60,000 single parents with children under the age of 6 and low-income families will also be eligible to all these schemes.
We've added 13 new public housing areas. When we procure 20 more locations by the end of this year, 43 so-called newlywed towns will be created in various spots throughout the country.
This comes as the country grapples with a chronically low birth rate and a waning preference for marriage among the younger generation. A survey shows around 46% of young adults believe marriage and childbirth is not necessary. Also, 46% have cited housing and the cost of marriage as the reason they're hesitant to tie the knot. To tackle the root of the problem, the government also plans to boost housing and income stability for adults aged between 19 and 39. This includes providing 270,000 council homes and dormitories for 60,000 college students, as well as financial schemes for housing. They'll also be able to apply for office spaces at discounted rates. Some 750,000 youth will be eligible for these programs, nearly 200,000 more than in last year's roadmap. The Land Ministry aims to implement these measures from this year through 2022 as part of its broader housing welfare roadmap worth $106 billion. Addressing concerns that the expanded support would cost an extra $15 billion, a ministry official said extra costs would be covered by excess funds without causing a big strain on government budget. Young, Arirang News.
President Moon Jaein is all for that government support measure. Meeting with newlyweds in the capital, the Liberal leader pledged to provide policy support for the young couples so as to help ease the burdens of finding an affordable home. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us his remarks.
Leaving work at a regular time is a foreign concept to many. Even considering marriage is an extravagance. All because housing is becoming too much of a burden in people's lives, according to the South Korean leader. President Moon Jae-in insists that all people should be able to enjoy basic housing welfare.
정부는 안정적인 주거 마련에 더 팔을 걷어붙이려 합니다. 방향과 목표는 분명합니다. 신혼부부와 청년들의 주거 부담을 해결해 주는 것입니다.
President Moon made such comments while meeting with newly married couples on Thursday night in an apartment complex in Western Seoul, specifically constructed to provide homes for people in their 20s and 30s, including newlyweds, college students, and people who recently joined the workforce. It was the location where the South Korean president chose to announce his administration's housing measures for newlyweds and the younger generation.
그러기 위해서 이번 대책에 투입되는 재정 규모는 지난 정부에 비해 3배에 달합니다. 심각한 저출산 문제의 해결을 위해 국민들께서 동의해 주시리라고 믿습니다.
Similar government support will be provided to single-parent households as well. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Samsung's expected earnings for Q2 is out. The tech titan's profit growth is forecast to be lower than the first quarter of the year. Poor smartphone sales is seen as the key contributing factor in the downward trend. Ko Ryun-hee help us look beyond the digits.
Samsung Electronics on Friday posted its expected earnings for the second quarter of 2018. Operating profit was up 5.2% on year, reaching some $13.2 billion. But that's 5.4% lower than the previous quarter, which stood at around $14 billion. Samsung had delivered a string of record earnings, and the new figures mark the first time in 7 quarters the company has posted an on-quarter decrease in profits. Meanwhile, second quarter sales were estimated at $51.8 billion, down 4.9% from a year earlier. An economic expert attributed the fall in profits to the weak sales of its smartphones.
The smartphone market is saturated, and we probably won't observe significant changes in this sector. Consumers aren't interested in the latest Samsung models because not much has improved from the previous ones.
The display segment is also expected to post weak earnings because the prices of LCD panels are falling. This expert said it is too early to say that earnings will decline in the third quarter because Samsung still has strong overseas sales of semiconductors. Meanwhile, LG Electronics has also posted its estimated earnings for the April to June period. The firm posted an operating profit of $691 million. Sales rose 3.2% over the same period to reach $13.4 billion. Analysts attributed the increase to stable sales of TVs and home appliances. Samsung and LG are expected to release their finalized figures later this month. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Signs of peace and reconciliation are becoming clearly visible in various corners of the Korean peninsula. In tune with this welcome turnaround, a special exhibition on the now-shuttered Kaesong Industrial Park opened its doors here in Seoul. Kim Mo-gyun provides a sneak peek at what life was like at a place once looked to as a beacon of hope for greater economic cooperation.
The Kaesong Industrial Park was launched by the two Koreas in 2004 in order to help North Korea start to reform its economy and ease tensions between the two sides. However, operations have been suspended since February 2016 following Pyongyang's nuclear and missile tests. As the thaw in inter-Korean relations has put cooperation between the two sides back on the table, the Culture Ministry has launched a special exhibition that shows past moments of cooperation at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The display includes graphs that show the number of employees and sales figures at the complex, as well as exhibits showing 24 hours in the life of a Kaesong employee. Starting with a group exercise, the first batch of employees at the joint complex begin their shift at 8 a.m. They take 20 minutes off during the morning and afternoon, and they also have time to take care of their children after their lunch hour begins at midday. They finish work all together at 6 p.m. when the next shift starts so that the factory can operate around the clock. The exhibition also shows what the factories looked like and what the South and North Korean workers produced. The workers in the park made various products like embroidered clothes, dishes, and stainless steel products to be sold in the South. One of the organizers of the event hopes the exhibition could pave the way for operations in the complex to resume and for further cooperation between the two Koreas.
At a time when many people are hoping for peace on the Korean peninsula, I wanted to show how life was at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. I hope the exhibition can help people understand the situation in the north and act as a stepping stone for more inter-Korean cooperation to come.
The exhibition will continue until September 2nd at the Culture Station Seoul 284 in Central Seoul. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates we'll need. Michelle, what's the weather like this weekend?
Daniel, we're going to see blue skies with a few clouds tomorrow, but remember that we are going to have scorching sun coming through, which will make us start sweating instantly. So drink lots of water and have your sunblock ready. Now, rain is constantly in the forecast. Now, there are chances of sporadic showers in the southern regions through the night, while the East Coast and Jeju will get rain until the morning. Now, the amount isn't much, but there is blustery wind with it. The morning in Seoul begins tomorrow at 18 degrees Celsius, and it's slightly higher for Gwangju at 20 and Busan at 19 degrees. It's not going to be sticky though, since the northeasterly wind will keep the air moving, especially in the east. Now, Daegu and Busan remains in the mid-20s, while Seoul reaches up to 29 degrees. Now, Seoul and most other regions will stay clear, but Jeju continues to get soaked by the monsoon rain this weekend, which will spread nationwide by Monday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Here's wishing you an incredible weekend.